The holidays are coming, but the draft scouting community does not sleep. We are here with another episode here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show. And Jam and we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy with you guys today. Jam, how we doing?
Fantastic. Got a great show lined up. Some philosophy talk and some translation to that with actual big board stuff and some prospects who are rising and falling for us. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, man, it's going to be fun. So without further ado, let's rock. What's going on, y'all? We are live here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show, here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel. We're also on your podcast player of choice. Jam, I said live, but let's not lie to the folks. They're going to figure it out here in just a couple minutes anyway. With the holiday seasons coming up, I'm going to be hitting the road going to Arkansas. We still want to give you guys the content that you all very much so deserve. So Jam and I were getting together here on a Thursday evening before I head to Arkansas to discuss some fun things, man. But before we get into those things, Jam, just happy holidays and Merry Christmas to the fine folks out there. But you too, man. Like this is it's been a fun season with you. How are you holding up? What's your holiday plans that you got going on, brother?
Doing great, man. I appreciate that. Happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. Happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, all that great stuff. You know, just in this time, whatever you celebrate, it's just wonderful to be around family if you're able to do that, you know, to be able to celebrate the year that we've had and we've survived, you know, and looking forward to the new year. But no serious plans, just, you know, hanging out with family, looking forward to some good food as well, open up a few gifts and, you know, just creating some more long lasting memories, you know, in this short time that we have in life.
That's right, brother. Yeah, I'm going to be going to Arkansas. It's going to be the first time that I've been there in, gosh, I don't know. I want to say 3-4 years. It might even be
Wow.
longer than that. So it's going to be awesome for the youngins to kind of see some extended family for the first time in a long time, if not for the first time. Just with the nature of my job, it's kind of been hard to travel with everybody, but glad to get some time with the family, just like you said, Jam. But we're gonna get going here into the episode here. And Jam, we were kind of batting a few ideas around that we wanted to do for this episode in preparations for, you know, this fun week that we have going on. And Jam, you wanted to talk about some philosophy stuff, but it felt like it's kind of like the song "I Miss You" by Blink 182. I don't know if you know the story behind that song, but evidently, like, that song was kind of like a compilation of other pieces of songs that the band had wrote separately, and they just kind of compiled it into one song. So that's kind of what we're doing here with this episode. We were like, let's talk about some big boards. Let's talk about some prospects that you and I might differ on. And ultimately, we're going to close the show with who our favorite. These aren't going to be the best or anything like that, just our personal favorite risers that we've seen throughout the season, and thus have adjusted accordingly on our big board, Jam. So let's get started. We're going to open the show up with big board philosophy. So Jam, you sent a list of questions that we want to discuss here on the show between the two of us. Very first one is, what is your process behind preseason big board construction? I think that this is a great kind of like opening for the show here, Jam. I'm going to throw that to you, brother. What's your preseason big board process look like?
Yeah, for sure. We got a chance a couple of weeks ago to talk to friend of the program, excellent scout, content creator, however you want to categorize it, just basketball mind, and James Barlow. So it was great
Draft
to kind of,
junkie, some
yes,
might say.
absolutely. Some might say. So it was great to get his thought process behind that, you know. So that's kind of where we started. And I wanted to really dig into this with you a little bit more. And, you know, for me, my big board process, it's changed just a little bit. And I'll say this with no ceilings, though, the past couple years. So we are obviously tasked with putting together preseason big boards. And in my past with other scouting and consulting companies, Personally, I didn't do a big board into January. My
Hmm.
preseason stuff, it was about just kind of grouping guys into tiers or buckets, however you want to categorize them. And then as the season goes, add and kind of change and, adjust the board. And then you really kind of really get your big board once you are heading into January. And for me, one of the reasons I did that, there was no really need or pressure to get out a preseason board publicly. And then also, it just gives you a little bit more time to get a stronger sample size of what's going on, be able to see guys, what is translating with enough games, what's working, what's not working, to be able just to have a little bit more confidence, a little more stability within the big board once that gets built. But really, just the process behind my big board, just like everyone else, it involves a ton of film work. For me, I try my best to stay up to date with high school stuff throughout the season and do that kind of scouting in real time. So by the time players are reaching the point where they are becoming freshmen in college and are really going to draft radar, I've seen them for multiple years. Even guys who obviously are tracking to be 5 4-star guys, these guys who are projected to be top picks. So being able to see them a lot, and then also in passing, and you get to see a lot of the lower level guys who eventually rise too. So I try to do a lot of my work in real time in preparation, and then right before the season, it's like, all right, let's cram, let's really get micro on these prospects heading into it. And I guess the last thing I would say before heading into the season, if there are guys that I think for all of us, there's going to be some blind spots for us. Won't be able to get to everyone that we want to, despite watching so much film, or we may not have seen enough of people. So, kind of what I subscribe to and what I was taught is that scouting is a concert of the eyes, the ears, and the number in that order.
Mm.
Have to be playing in tune, and it kind of leads that way. So, first and foremost, I'm trusting what I see in my evaluation. And then, as I said, if I'm not able to get to as much as the prospect that I want to, I'm talking to people that I trust, people like Steven, the No Ceilings,
Hey.
other, other people within and without the scouting industry as well, NBA and all that stuff as well. You're just like, hey, how are you feeling about this prospect? I haven't seen too much, or just trying to get a valued opinion from those that I trust. And then I'm looking at the numbers at the end. I'm trying to match up, doing a little deep dive with the data, getting a little nerdy with that to try to support everything in general, but especially for guys that I may not be able to get to. So that's just kind of how I approach my preseason big board construction and philosophy. Um, how do you feel about my approach? Do you have any similarities, or how do you kind of take it when you are putting together the preseason big board?
That's a very sound approach, Jam. I'm gonna ask a question to you
Yeah,
before I kinda get going. So you said prior to No Ceilings. I mean, obviously, I know this. I wanna share I know some of this.
yeah,
I'm gonna learn a little bit here in a minute too,
yeah.
but the audience may not know as well, Jam, about your consulting that you did prior to, being a part of No Ceilings. So how long, holistically speaking, like, I think this is a great question to ask for this. How long would you say that you have been scouting, draft talent?
Geez, honestly, I can't lie. It feels like since I've been in elementary school, like this has always been on the forefront of my mind, evaluating, even when I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But as far as kind of
Prodigy
profession,
going on right
yeah,
here.
I wish. But as far as the professional route, geez, 14 years, which is kind of crazy to say.
Wow.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate to get my start from actually with Nathan Grubel, who I actually was able to work with later. As everyone knows is Draft Deeper here at No Ceilings. But under Alon Vinokourov was a scout for the Lakers for the past, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. He's been holding it down, doing a great job there. But under his company, EV Hoops, and got a chance to learn from him. And then, once he made his transition to becoming a member of the Lakers, working for BPA Hoops as well, too. So being able to do that, and being able to learn from different people, and then also just really figuring out what that process is preseason for me. That's been very, very instrumental in, kind of this progression, how I approach everything.
That's incredible, man. So I learned a little bit during that time too, just in that breakdown. This is great. So the reason I ask that is because I feel like my process has changed so much. And truth be told, like if we want to say professionally or at least seriously in the amateur ranks prior to no ceiling, like this is like my fifth year kind of doing this. So I'm still learning a lot, like year over year. I'm still kind of like sharpening my skills. I'm still kind of like harnessing my process. And I feel like so much changes like year over year. And I
Hmm.
don't know if it's necessarily a good or a bad thing because I feel like I'm pretty consistent with like a hit rate. I'm not going to sit here and say that like I'm 100%, far be it from me to think that I'm like the foremost authority right now, but I feel like I would do a decent job, but I still haven't found like my solidified process yet. And I don't know if I'm ever going to, so historically speaking, before I started gaining access to some of the stuff that I have access to now, a lot of it was just eye test. And then as I could start, investing resources in my own kind of like independent study, I would lean a little bit more into the analytics and talking to people and figuring out like, okay, what translates? Let me listen to other smart people in the community that I respect. Let me reach out and talk to some of these people in the community that I respect as well. So year over year, I've kind of changed my process, but I would say coming into this season, my big board construction was a lot of priors where I could, and I told you this too, Jam, that I'm trying to get better at the grassroots level myself instead of having to rely on the projections from other really smart people. At the end of the day, I still want to, if I'm going to put a number next to a name, I want it to be as much as my opinion as possible. Right. So I would
Absolutely.
say over the years, I've gotten better at analyze like managing my time to where I can continue to watch the current crop of prospects while looking at the future crop as well. And since we've been able to work with folks like the overtime elite, or if I'm doing work with like the folks over, that do great work with JUCO and high school prospects, I'm reaching out to those people and trying to kind of get more access and formulate more of my own opinion on these guys. It's changed my process so much, but I still think that right now it's my priors coming in that I've seen these guys, along with still relying on at least a list of people to start watching film on, and then I'll just watch film and adjust my own ranking as possible. Now the danger with this is prospects that we're going to be talking about later, like the Keaton Wagler, who really
Yeah.
wasn't on any of those lists. So how do I get better at identifying those types of guys? It's going out to some of these high school kind of competitions and stuff like that. It's getting ready to go to Hoop Summit this year and watching these guys for myself prior to the summer where I can start looking at them. And then, oh, by the way, taking more detailed notes on players that I feel like are going to be returning to college and going back and watching them kind of after the fact. I feel like one of the prospects that helped me the most on this season was LeBaron Philon, who was a prospect I wasn't super high on through the majority of last year. And then I started watching his film again over the summer. And then I started realizing, oh, well, he did close out last season as a good 3-point shooter. So that adjusted my perspective of him coming in. And he's kind of lived up to my preseason rankings to where like I could appreciate a more holistic game. And I have a better kind of representation of what to expect from him coming into the year. So a lot of my prospect um, big board construction in the summer comes from watching these guys. And I feel like I kind of have to watch like a handful of incoming guys and a handful of returners and kind of sort them and figure out who I like where, and then take detailed notes that I can go back on because as I'm like, I'll hit prospect like 80 something on my board. And I'm like, well, I haven't watched prospect 6 in like 2 weeks. So let me
Yeah.
hit some highlights. Let me look at my notes and like, okay, I kind of feel like they fall into this range, if that makes sense, Jam.
No, it definitely does, and I appreciate what you shared about your process not being set. And I think that's a wonderful thing because we're always, just like in life, we always want to grow with what we do and continuously get better. And that's exactly what scouting is. Scouting can certainly humble you real quick with certain things about being right and wrong on guys and missing certain things. So yeah, I really love that. Like we're all trying to refine our process, add to it, figure out what works, what no longer works for us, and what we can tweak. So I think that's great. Question that popped up as you were talking about, especially with Wagler, because I know we're going to get into him more in detail later. But someone like him, if you haven't, how do you account for guys that you are essentially seeing maybe for the first time on the collegiate level that you have not seen on the grassroots level? Is there anyone that kind of slips through the cracks that way?
I think that this is a great question to kind of rope into the second question that you
Yeah.
presented for here. And that question, Jam, was what are your thoughts on moving prospects up and down your board early? I defined early for us in here, Jam, and based on what you said about what you used to do before no
Hmm.
ceilings is like once January hits, that's when you would really start fortifying a board. It's just funny that you mentioned that. I had no idea that that part of your answer was coming. In my notes, I said, let's just say before January is early. So I think it's important for a guy like Keaton Wagler to say, okay, the expectations for him weren't high. I haven't
Hmm.
seen any of him coming in. I have to go back and watch film during this season, and I have to compare that to notes that I took about some of the other freshmen, like even the lower end freshmen who I really had zero expectations on. How does what I'm watching on his high school film, even though there might be some like anchoring bias to some of the success that I'm seeing now, like at the end of the day, we're all going to have a bias just based on what we're
Yeah.
seeing at the time that we're watching it. I think it'd be silly to say that we're bias free when we're scouting. We just have to be self aware enough to identify like what we might be kind of leaning towards and
Exactly.
how we can kind of almost counteract that or at least make a sound argument against it. So for a guy like Keaton Wagler, I had to go back and watch his high school film while also watching his college film, knowing that he's going to ultimately, this film plus whatever he did in the film that I'm not watching has equaled this. I have to understand that variable. I have to try to figure out what X is in that equation, right? So
Yeah.
I watch film. Have reached out to people, not a lot of people in the early part of the season. Like I'm talking first game when I watched him, really knew a whole heck of a lot about him because at some point we're all relying on the opinions of those who have just laid the groundwork. Like if
Yep.
we're being
Yep.
honest, like that's it, at some point it could be super far back, but at some point we're relying on the groundwork of somebody else when we're evaluating talent for the NBA. So not a lot of people have seen him and I just have to compare his current film to the film of others. And what that has done for me, Jam, is allowed me to move him up my board, which inherently means some other people are falling down. So
Hmm.
let's answer that part of it. Your thoughts on moving prospects up and down your board early. Jam, I would say that something that I'm leaning in heavily to this year, this is a changing part, kind of going back to what we were talking about a second ago, this is a part that I am really starting to embrace this season is to not be precious to my rankings because I feel like that I can have priors, I can have a strong sense of feeling about what a player is supposed to be, right? And this is where the other side of a bias can come in. I know it's early, but if the evidence is strongly suggesting that this player is really, really good, based off of the film, based off of the numbers, based off of how the coach is trusting them, based off how his teammates, including upperclassmen, are trusting him. That's going to inform my ranking. And I feel like, Jam, for whatever reason, it's taken me this fifth year to feel comfortable saying that if I feel like a player's not doing good, I'm not going to keep him there because either I had strong priors or other, and I'm going to be transparent here, that other places still have him ranked high. I'm just
Yeah.
not going to allow that to influence me this year, as much as what has taken place other seasons, right? So that's why I'm able to move a Keaton Wagler up, even though I didn't have strong priors, even though he might not be ranked high on other places yet. We've seen enough at this point that eventually people will catch up. So, like, what does it matter if I move a player now in December as opposed to January if I have a strong conviction that they deserve to be moved?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially with Keaton, because he's someone to an extent came out of nowhere on draft boards, more so a guy that's probably, year 2, year 3 that would be prominent on draft boards. But he said, "Nuh-uh, like I'm ready now, and I'm
Yes.
probably the best prospect on, for Illinois." And I think that we do, and you made a great point about we can't be too married, too tied, to our precious rankings. And like it kind of flows into another question about like power rankings versus like
Mm,
big boards. Like, are they one and the same? Or big boards power rankings until they're not. Like, I think everyone is going to find out what their threshold is, and that's going to change with different players in different situations of what it takes to move guys up and down and how soon. Like, if you've seen like 3 games and you're just like, oh man, I'm moving such and such up from like, well, I'll try. I want to get to, we're going to talk about Kingston. These all just tie so much.
yeah.
I'm trying to give away too much as we get into different guys we want to talk about. But so a guy like Kingston Fleming, for me, who was outside of my top 30, more so because of feeling that he's going to be behind Uzan, and Emmanuel Sharp is going to have his time to be able to have high usage and things like that. I thought it would be more like, all right, I'm getting the conference play. He's earning the trust of Coach Sampson, and he's rolling. Kingston was obviously very, very talented coming into the class, but just about what the opportunity will look like and how quick he's got there. So I know for like 3 games, it was like, all right, I'm not moving Kingston. Like, it's great. Like, but I had 3 games, but I need to see more and more. And then, by this time, he's jumped from me, from being outside the top 30 to, but I believe I have him. Let me give a quick double check. I have him at 11,
Okay.
and climbing.
Some
So I
might
think
say that that's still too low, even though he's had that big leap in variability on your board?
exactly, exactly. So it's all kind of in the eye of the beholder and like what you are comfortable with. And I think just at the end of the day and how I approach big boards, and it goes back to big board versus power rankings, is when I put out a big board, when I'm constructing a big board, when I look at it, I want it to read, these were the best players in order when their careers are all said and done.
Yeah.
That's the way that I approach it. So like, it is a power rankings to an extent, but like, once you find new information, as you like to say, you want to adjust to that new information. And it's about how much do you adjust, you know, your rankings and apply that new information, how much that matters to you, and how large that sample size is. We talked about getting to January. Once we get to January, we're going to have about what, 13, 15 game sample size, somewhere in
Sure.
that range, right around this
Be
time.
about
Most
halfway
teams,
through a season, right?
exactly. So you have
Yeah.
more right around this time. I think about most teams are 10, 11 games or so as we are in, mid to late December here. So I really do just try to look at big boards more as like that projection for the future at all times. So I do think at some points I do anchor to certain things, not to say that I'm is opposed to changing, but still when it's this early, if something I've seen and believe in, whether it's someone's profile, the priors, and those type of things, like I'm gonna roll with it until there's a more of a significant sample size for me. Or if like honestly something's just that gut, like I've seen enough. It could be 5 games and like I've seen this pattern before. If it's a returning player, I've seen it from him or similarly tight profile prospect, and just drawing from those past experiences. So it definitely does vary.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a really good point, Jam, about big board versus power ranking. And, you mentioned how I have said a lot this season that, once I see new evidence that I'm going to allow that to impact where I put a player. I think it's important to prioritize the evidence, if that makes sense, right? Like
I love it. Yes.
what do you think evidence is? I guess is the question. And for me, evidence isn't just production in college, but the how can you project that production at the next level? For me, for a guy, like if we're gonna talk about Fleming, it's understanding all the things that I mentioned earlier about Keaton. It's about the coach putting trust. It's about the player getting the ball in crunch time, even though that there's another NBA talent guard on this team, like willingly deferring to him. Like that means something to me. But then what does this look like in an NBA scheme? And this is why it's important to not just talk to talent evaluators, but other people within the basketball community. Through no ceilings, I've been fortunate enough to be blessed to have contacts that I would otherwise never ever have. Especially as young in my scouting career as I am. And I talk to skills trainers, and they get direct information from NBA teams that
Yep.
other people in the community just aren't going to get. Right. So skills trainers for guards right now are telling me that the NBA is saying for guards, you got to answer two questions. Can you handle the ball under pressure? And can you pick up full court? And that's what I look at. If I feel like the evidence is suggesting that, then that's going to influence how willing I am to move a guard up or down the lineup. It's not just going to be, can you score 20 points and shoot 40% from deep? How do you fill in the other areas of your game that the NBA right now is telling us is important? And that's what influences my willingness to move a player up and down my board. It's a projection of how they will fit in an NBA system, not simply just that they're producing at a high level in college, because they're two different games, Jam, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you talked about being able to handle pressure and be able to apply pressure as well too. They they said LeVar Ball was a madman, but he talked about if he was an NBA coach, that's what he would do. He would press all game
Yep.
and play at a high pace, like they did at Chino Hill. So it's just funny to see that type of stuff coming into fruition.
Absolutely. All right. So, Jam, the last question. This has been a lot of fun, by the way. I'm glad that we agreed to do this. I'm having a good time. The last question that we have for big board philosophy, and I think that this is important because this can almost go into a different question because I think people will conflate these two things. But your question at face value when you sent it to me reads, how do you weigh positional value and fit when constructing your big board? Jam, I want to kind of parlay that into something else too. And we can even answer this as its own separate question, but
Hmm.
the difference between a big board and a mock draft, I feel like people can kind of conflate the philosophy between those two completely separate things, and they can just kind of like let it bleed over and translate. So we'll go with your question first. How do you weigh positional value and fit when constructing your big board, Jam?
Yeah, this one is a big thing for me. And before I kind of get into the basketball side of it, it reminded me a lot of football just in general when
Mhm.
they are you deciding going through the same process we are putting together a big board and everything like that. Running backs are typically not valued that high. They have to really be special, and we talk about that right now in this kind of, I'm not sure how up to date and close you're following the NBA scouting. I'm excuse me, the NFL scouting stuff.
I listen
But
every episode. Big McShay guy. I'm listening to him and Mensch,
you're
every at least the next day after a pod is released for them.
no doubt I'm in that same boat with you. That's it's an excellent resource to have for sure. And Jeremiah Love, the running back for Notre
Notre
Dame,
Dame. Yep.
is widely considered a top 3, top 5 at worst talent in the class. but there's a strong chance that he's going to be drafted somewhere 8, 9, 10. Probably won't get out of the top 10, but there is a good chance that could happen. And that is strictly because of the positional value that is placed, or maybe the lack of positional value, I should say, on running backs. Just the timeline they have, the wear and tear, and just how easy they can be replaced. But there's a strong chance when you do a redraft that Jeremiah Love is going to return that top 3 to top value to top 5 value. And that happens consistently, with running backs and like receivers and safeties, as opposed to quarterbacks who teams may reach a little bit more because of that positional value. And I think for me, that does play a part when I'm trying to organize my big board. And then kind of give a more tangible example.
I'm sorry, Jim, real quick. I don't mean to interrupt your stream of consciousness here. So I just want to make sure. So you're saying that you do weigh positional value to some degree when constructing your big board?
To some degree.
Okay.
And that's what I am trying to still kind of really figure out. And I think Derek Queen is someone who's helping me do that. And that's more so for me. Derek Queen, I had him at 7. And that for me, that was more, but the top big in the class, that was more so not really about like bigs, but more so about just like how he would fit, or essentially be fit proof. I thought like there would maybe be certain teams where he was a better fit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where I really approach it. And I think I may have overthought things, and I'm trying to figure that out, guys who are fit proof and what that really looks like. Because we talked about, hey, what type of big does Derek Queen need to play next to? How is he optimizing this and that? And really, it should have been like, he is the talent. Like everyone would fit or like fit around him with that ridiculous skill set. And and that's, I think that's the way I should have really approached it. And this kind of the last thing before I turn over to you. Sorry for the long.
This is good, dude. Here. No, go ahead, do your thing.
But Kevin Porter Jr., guy that I absolutely loved on the floor during his draft class, thought he was a top 3 talent, but ended up having him outside of the lottery because of, we're still in the lottery, but outside the top 10, but still a lottery type of guy, but more so of what was going on off the court with him. And then how that would fit in certain places. Did certain teams have the infrastructure, the culture, the care factor to really help him, to manage him and help this young man grow, considering all things that he was going through with that talent. So that was one of the reasons why, like, I didn't just straight have him as 3, So trying to find that balance is what has been difficult for me. And I kind of battle every year. And I'm just continuously learning that, like, at some point you just kind of have to just trust the talent, and maybe that talent really just weighs out guys being fit proof more than not.
This is, dude, I'm loving the direction that you're taking this to. I think you brought up the fit proof thing, and I think that fit proofing has to almost kind of like, it has to have a certain factor applied to your evaluation, but I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I don't think that if for a player to be fit proof, it could be like a line of delineation between some talent, but I don't think that it's necessarily like a tier elevator. The way that I look at it, and I had Derek Queen 4th on my board. I really liked him a lot. And it's because there's feel. There was just such an insane amount of feel. And this goes back to like what you value in a talent. And even though he wasn't the most athletically imposing big man, he was the best big man in the class to me, because even though he wasn't like an explosive leaper, he wasn't Jalen Duren coming out of Memphis, right? Like, he's a completely different type of big, even though they do share some same feel qualities and characteristics. Even though he wasn't bouncy, he was still very strong. And ultimately for his position, I think that is like the more important thing, is like, can you be strong? He would still show that he could be a good rebounder. he showed that he can be a great passer, someone that you can have the offense flow through. But the handle and just movement, I wish I could quantify like the kinetic movement of a player, because I think that sometimes it could be as simple as he moves like an NBA player. So at some point I have to put that player up. I can't assign a number to this. I don't know how, but I think this is, the Corey's thing of in scouting is like man of faith, man of science. I don't know how to scientifically prove to you that Derek Queen is awesome, but if you just watch, he is to me. So that's kind of where I was on him. But I think that positional value and fit do not, personally for me, they do not influence where I have a player on a big board, because in my big board, it's like if everything hits right, this is how I would rank these players, understanding that where they go, like, are they going to be, to your point, that where you said we just have to look at Derek Queen like, okay, you are the system. That's where I think you can kind of get into the mock draft and understand that, like, okay, based on a certain place, I may take this player lower, even though I have them ranked relatively high on my board, if that makes sense, Jam.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I'm just disappointed, still disappointed in myself, because Derek Queen, a guy that I've seen a lot grassroots here in the area with Team Thrill out of Baltimore. So if there's any guy at this point where I should have been like, just trust the talent and not worry about like, so the defense, not something I was worried about. Like I actually liked the defensive playmaking and what he showed. Like I felt like I nailed the evaluation, the projection on what it looks like in the NBA. I just overthought like we talk about the fit,
Mhm.
and him maybe not being the cleanest fit for every team, as opposed to him just being the talent. And I think that just messed me up. So I definitely will not do that again. At least we're working not to do that again. And I appreciate Derek Queen for helping me do that, because he was easily a top three, tier one. Well, I say tier two talent, outside of Flag in that class, but right there with Dylan Harper, VJ, and Ace for sure.
And Khan too, right? Like
Yeah,
Khan
Khan
was,
for sure. Yes, in that tier. Yep.
and I think too that like it's important to understand like what we do is different than what NBA teams do, because we are taking hundreds of prospects, putting them into a vacuum and say like this is just who we like
Yes.
playing
Yes.
the game of basketball right now. NBA teams have a completely different task in general, Jam, as you well know too. How are they going to help my team? Like how are they
Hmm.
going to help? And then there's the, is this a player that's going to immediately contribute, because my job security might not be the best right now. I might not be long in the tooth on this team. So can I
Hmm.
afford for an Usman Jang to take 4 years to potentially maybe someday sort of develop? If not, I'm not going to take him. If I do have that sort of job security, I might take him, and then hopefully, J Dub is available a few picks later, and then I can go get
Yeah.
him and then still look like a genius, right? So it it it's completely different what we do compared to NBA teams, but it is still an important service, because as you know too, Jim, like NBA teams look at what we do and how we value players as well. So like it's this fun ecosystem. This is why I love basketball too, man. Is like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's this bigger community than a lot of people realize, and we all play a part in feeding into each other.
Absolutely. And one more question I asked you that came up as you were talking about big boards, kind of just sparked something for me. When you were talking about big boards, when you look at it and your board, it's like if everything hits, this is what my order is. How
Mhm.
do you balance that with the fact that it's not going to hit? And I think that's where and some of that does come to fit. Some guys are going to be second team guys. So how do you balance that with the fact that you are kind of essentially just ranking them on pure talent if everything does hit? Like, where is that balance in that middle ground? I think that's, as I said time and time again with Queen here. I think that's where I struggled and missed.
It's interesting, and I've heard this in a million different podcasts. Like anyone who listens to podcasts outside of No Ceilings, like it's okay, I do too.
Yeah.
But like I feel like I hear this all the time. Like if you ever listen to Ryan Russillo, I love the way he will just like kind of cut through the crap and say what a lot of people just do as opposed to like fluffing things up. And
Yeah.
he's, like he says stuff like if you talk for a living, you're going to get some things wrong. And that might rub people the wrong way, but it's true. Like
Yep.
if you speak and have an opinion about stuff professionally, like you're going to get told you're an idiot just as much, if not more, as you get a congratulations. As a matter of fact, it's like almost for every one time you get a congratulations, you're going to get 3 or 4 people who said, remember when you were wrong about this thing, right? So
Yeah, you
it's just,
suck.
yeah, it's the nature of the beast. But another thing he says too is like, we have philosophies, we have stances, we have foundational things that we find important regarding different things about sports, but we contradict ourselves all the time. You know what I mean? Like we will contradict things, and ultimately it goes back to the thing again. I'm giving Corey credit here. Sometimes it's the man of faith aspect where it's like, you know what? Like typically, I hate players that are not physically imposing, not super duper strong. Um, Look like they're not going to be able to hold up well on the court, but there's just something about this Keaton Wagler guy that I really, really like, So going back to the whole big board versus mock draft thing, the way I almost kind of like put a partition between the two because I'm like, big board is if everything hits right, these are how I value players. Whenever I'm in mock draft mode, I try to put myself in the mindset of, okay, what's my contract situation look like? How many picks do I have? What are the strengths of this team? Do they have anybody that I'm afraid or think that I can't draft over? What's the job security? What's the draft history tell us that is likely going to be the way that the mock draft goes? There's just so much. In my opinion, big board is easy. Mock draft is hard because there's just so much more variables that go into it. And I almost just don't even think about these two things at the same time. I think that's how I'm able to keep my philosophy the way I do is because I have 2 boxes in my brain. They don't touch, they don't bleed over. I go into one box for big board. I go into one board the other box for mock draft, if that makes sense, Jam.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think no matter what everyone's philosophy is and kind of like process to get there, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to when the career is done for guys in that class. If you had that order right of who was the most impactful, who was the best player, however you got there, that's what matters at the end of the day.
And as much as that's what matters the most for us, like I said, there are going to be people who aren't going to remember that I had Derek Queen high. They're going to be like, how in the world did you mess up having Cassius Winston really high in your first ever big board ranking? And he is nowhere to be seen in the NBA right now. So we got to
do you
humble
watch
ourselves.
basketball? Like, what are you watching?
Yeah, right. I love that. But all right, Jam. I feel like that was a fantastic discussion that we just had with the big board philosophy. Ultimately turned into a little bit of scouting philosophy. We want to we want to do this a little bit more this season here on the show, and I feel like we got to do that. But Jam, we're gonna hit this quick break, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm sure there's gonna be more philosophical discussion here. But you and I, we're gonna be a little bit frenemies here. We're gonna talk about some of the prospects that you and I see differently. We're gonna talk about where we have them ranked and why we kind of have them where we have them. So everybody just hang tight on the other side of this break, and Jam and I, we're going to get into a fist fight. All right, hang tight. We are back here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show, here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel. We're also on your podcast player of choice. Jam and I, we have had a really long discussion, but really good. And I hope that you all found it beneficial to you as you're watching and everything. Please leave your comments. Even though this isn't live, we will go back and look at these and we'll talk about them, and we'll try to reach out and leave little comments on our YouTube as well. But if you want to if you want to hit us up and talk to us, Jam, we don't really do this on our show. Maybe we need to get better at this, but
Yeah, we do.
before we get into the prospects that you and I are going to throw down on here in a second, where can the folks find you on social media if they want to ask you questions and get even more like individual insight from Jam Boozer? Where can they do that?
Absolutely. Hit me up at Jam on the Boards, slide in the DMs. I'm cool with that. We have a nice little conversation about some prospects, philosophy, just all basketball across any levels.
There we go. And if you want to hit me up, I'm most active on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Stephen G Hoops. And don't forget to, if you want to be a No Ceilings Plus member, you have access to our Discord where you can ask us and the rest of the crew as many questions as you want. As a matter of fact, over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, we just had our December Q&A where we had questions just solely asked from No Ceilings Plus members, asked to the team, where a lot of the team went through and gave you our replies on some of these questions, and some of it draft philosophy related. All right, Jam. So,
man, what a plug. That was smooth, seamless.
Hey, yeah, work where I have to. You know what I'm saying? All right, Jam. You and I, we're going to talk about prospects that we differ on. We're going to open up with a familiar name where you and I have had pretty candid discussions about him early on in the season, and it was so much fun. We're just going to do it again. But these are prospects where you might have one ranked high, I might be a little bit lower, and vice versa, Jam. So let's start with your sweet prince, Nate Ament, who I infamously have ranked at 18th on my board right now. Jam, the last ranking that I saw from you is 7. Is that where he's still residing?
Yeah, that's correct. He's dropped down 2 spots from 5 to 7, but I feel like I am kind of the resident Nate Ament guy here, still the believer in holding things down. Although
An apologist.
I do. Well, I'm not apologizing for his game. It is what it is. Like, he's going to continue to evolve and develop. But for me, I think just my approach with him, especially seeing a lot of him in person prior to him getting to Tennessee, is just that with my kind of frame, the way I was approaching him, yes, there is potential like star creator upside there. There's things that he does have to do to get there, as far as really becoming a better, space creator with the handle and the size and everything like that, to create just cleaner looks for himself, and just kind of the lack of burst and all those type of things. So for me coming to the season, like, I was prepared and didn't really expect for him to be on the NBA level, someone that projects to be like the number 1 option. I think that certainly was and still is in the range of outcomes. But for me, what really had me excited, and still does have me excited about Nate, is that his ability at 6'10" to be a 3 and D plus type of guy. Like, he was someone that was in the prize, very good shooter, the touch, the shot making ability, and the defensive playmaking was there on the high school, the grassroots level. He just has 1 block all year so far through, I believe it's 11 games, which is pretty shocking. And this is someone on the grassroots level who was a capable weak side shot blocker. I don't don't really expect for him and don't project for him to be like this fearsome shot blocker on the NBA level, but I thought he could be someone that can be capable. He's at least a presence there and can stick his nose in there, but we really just haven't seen that. For me, I still do believe in him being this pass, dribble, shoot type of big wing, and can be a defensive playmaker as well as 6'10". And even although stock numbers haven't been what I would hope and what we all really have hoped, he still is averaging a steal and a half per game. And as I mentioned, just 1 block all year is certainly not ideal. But I do think there's still a lot of tools and everything there for him. There's still plenty of season left to play. And I'll kind of wrap it up with this. For me, I would feel more comfortable. I probably left him at 5 if the shooting and defensive playmaking was there. I'm not too concerned about the self-creation really at that point. That is going to be what it is that's going to dictate the ceiling. But for one reason, I was high on Nate and still am. I thought the floor was still pretty high because of what I mentioned, him being a 3-and-D plus guy at 6'10". And then on top of that, we are seeing these significant changes and gains in his strength and his physique, So I thought that is certainly a positive thing going forward. Before I kind of let you, talk about Nate and give your dissenting opinion.
Or just crap all over him.
I'm just curious. If Nate was, so right now he's shooting 30.6% from three, 1.6 stocks per game. If he was shooting, let's say 38%, and just about 2 stocks per game, but still averaging 16 points per game, 7 rebounds, and obviously if he's shooting the three better, the field goal percentage will be up from 38%. But just strictly if the 3-point numbers were up to upper 30s and the stock numbers were around 2, how would that change your perception of his season so far and kind of his projection?
Jam, I want to answer this in a way that I have this bad habit, especially at work. Like sometimes I'll explain things and it makes me sound like a jerk. And I want to prelude this by saying that if I come across the type of way, I'm genuinely not trying to. I feel like you're almost asking though that like if he was a different player than what he's been so far, because I feel like an 8% swing in a 3-point shot, that's huge, like you ask like it's almost like asking like instead of evaluating a big man as a big man, what if he was like kind of a floor spacing wing almost? Like that's how vast like 8% could be in my opinion. I do see where you're going with that, and I see where you're going with the stock. Like I think I would value him higher, but it's not even just the numbers to me, Jam. It's like the numbers who he's been playing against, because Tennessee like hasn't had the strongest non-conference opponents. Like they've had some good ones, but it hasn't been like, if I can be a little bit of a homer here, I think they said that the Arkansas Razorbacks played against all the last season's Elite 8 teams. You know what I mean? Like, so that's like a tough schedule. Alabama's been playing against a tough schedule night over night. Tennessee has had some tough games, but they've also had some layups of games too. And I think that because Nate Ament obviously being the headlining name of that team, going against these directional state schools and still only having one block, still struggling to kind of like get to the basket at will, still struggling to shoot and stuff like that. I think that's the part that I'm wrestling with the most. Like if it was him going against like if he was on an Alabama schedule or something like that, I feel like I would be a little bit more understanding, but I don't know how much more comfortable he's going to get once Tennessee is in the heart of SEC conference play. So I'm almost kind of projecting the season a little bit too, based on the level of competition that he's played against this year. And which is why I am a little bit lower than you on him by 11 spots. I do want to say though, that I agree with you that there is some sort of value for what he is as a 3-and-D player. And I think a lot of us came in expecting him to be a kind of like like an offensive hub. That's what a lot of people like at the high end were kind of thinking that he was going to be. I think that you almost have to look at him now. And like, I even said this, I was on the Believe in Bulls podcast the other day, and I told the host Mario, I was like, if you haven't watched Nate Ament yet, don't listen to what anybody said about him during the summertime. Expect to watch a 3-and-D player. Expect to watch like a Zachary Richichet, a Jaden McDaniels, not the Kevin Durant name that was floating around recklessly over the summertime, but like watch him as a 3-and-D prospect, and I feel like you'll have a more appropriate assumption coming into the game, and you'll have a cleaner evaluation. I think I'm still kind of working through the shipwreckage of like what we thought he was going to be and what we kind of have to come to grips with what he is now, if that makes sense.
It does. And I guess my kind of question or just kind of my thoughts first about it is for those, I'm just curious how much for those in that camp watched him prior, I understand
Yeah.
because if you watched him prior, you would understand. I guess it's maybe a little different for me and people who watched him intently throughout the years and going through high school. But like if you watched him, you would know that like the Kevin Durant comps were not realistic and things of that. Maybe on the high end, that's what you're hoping, but like when you're really evaluating, and I know we want to evaluate for high end, but we should always be evaluating for multiple outcomes and having that all factor in, what the floor is, what kind of that mid outcome and what the ceiling is. Not just been like, all right, he's not what the ceiling is. So,
That's a good
everything's
thing to
just,
kinda talk back to what we were talking about with
oh
big
yeah.
board philosophy too, even, like, ranking, like, what are your how do you assess, like, the outcome of a player? Like, how do you go for the high end upside in your rankings, or are you kind of, like, playing it a little bit more moderately, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you have to consider all of that because at the end of the day, it's not always going to be the high end. It's not going to be the mid. You have to consider all that risk. That's a part of the risk factor when you're drafting and evaluating. You have to consider all these different outcomes. At least I think before you put them on the boards, can't be like, hey, he has Kevin Durant upside, so boom, he's number 3.
Yep.
And especially if you haven't watched his game intently or really know what the strength is, he was never going to be someone who's going to create paint touches at will. That was never his game. So I think it's unfair to penalize him for that because that's what we want to see or hope to see when that's never been his game. You know what I mean? And just to kind of go back to the shooting, I do recognize like the 30 to 38 is a high jump, even 35, 36, just something to show that he is a plus shooter. It doesn't have
Sure.
to be the 38. And it's kind of the priors with it. He has been a good shooter. He has not been a 30% shooter. So I'm just trying to contextualize it by like saying if he was closer to what he has historically been, he's been a better defensive playmaker and he's been a better shooter. You know, so if those were the cases at the low end, what does that look like? How is that effective? And I really valued that a lot at 6'10" and what I thought would be growing size and strength as well too. It just hasn't all clicked together. And kind of the last thing here, I know you're kind of, I want to say punting on the season for him,
Yeah.
but I do think that there is plenty of time for him to improve, and I don't want to say
It's
figure it
yeah,
out because I
it's not
don't think he's
over.
been bad. I don't think he's been bad. Like you talk about someone who's averaging 17 and 8 and a steal and a half per game, and he had the 20-point game against Rutgers, a 20-point game against Kansas as well too. So like I don't want I don't want the narrative to be like it's been all bad and he's just wet the bed against top competition because I don't think that's accurate, honestly. I think it's been a mixed bag, of course, especially when you consider what we hope the ceiling could be. But I think all in all, it's been a solid season that should get better. And I think there's low end things from the shooting that should improve. And then we could talk about the strength increase, how that potentially is affecting the shooting as well, too. So I think there's a lot of factors in play that is going to be very interesting that we ultimately will have to consider, and teams are going to have to ultimately consider for where they take Nate and where he ends up ultimately in the draft.
Yeah, fantastic point, Jam, as always. You keep me grounded. There is a lot of
Same
season.
here.
Yeah, and this is why we do what we do. There is so much season left, and I am very much so keeping the door open. I
Hmm.
just I worry about SEC play. It's going to be an important stretch for him. Like
Yeah.
if you and I are being honest, right? Like it's SEC play is going to tell scouts a lot on where he is projection wise, and there's just so much left of the season before we have a deeper, crazier conversation when it does come down to Nate
Yeah.
Ament. But Jam, let's move on now to a player who I don't know if we've talked about a lot on the show, to be honest with you. Um, Hans Steinbach out of
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah.
Um, And I say that you and I have a big difference. It's by 6 spots. Ultimately, like, there's a part of me that just wanted an excuse to talk about him here on the show, you know?
And
But
transparently, I moved him up from the early 20s recently. So yeah.
okay, good. Yeah, and I've moved him up too. I have him 10th on my board, and I have him and you have him 16th.
Hmm.
It's weird going back to a big board discussion, like, sometimes other players' movement will inevitably, like, thrust a player up, and it's not even sometimes, and this is gonna sound like I'm selling him short, I'm genuinely not trying to. Sometimes, like, it's a result of being lower on other players, then suddenly you realize, like, "Oh my gosh, I have Heinz Steinbach 10th on my board right now." Like,
Yeah.
I did not expect this from me, you know what I mean? Like, especially
Yeah.
me, I think Maxwell, Bombach put it perfectly in the group chat the other day. He was like, "I was trying to be cute with it at one point, and I was trying to be the low guy on Steinbach." And I feel like I was doing the same thing too. I was
Hmm.
trying to ignore the Euro play and stuff like that. But Jam, let's talk about him because there's clear strengths. There's also some clear areas of concern.
Yep.
And I think that this ties in perfectly to what you and I were talking about earlier with Derek Queen. And you kind of have to come to grips with what you value positionally and then how fit proof is this player,
Hmm.
because there are some clear positional concerns with Heinz Steinbach. So I love him. I have him 10th. You hate his guts. You have him at 16. I think that that's
He's
obviously not
terrible.
true. We just like to have we like to have fun here. Um, Jam, Heinz Steinbach, you said you moved him up recently. I've moved him up recently. Why should we be encouraged from what we've seen so far from Steinbach?
Man, you cannot ignore the production. 17.9 points per game, 11.9 rebounds per game, 2.7 assists per game, 1.7 stocks per game. That's one block and zero point 0.7 steals per game. He has just been an absolute machine. We talk about Cam Boozer being a machine. He's been a machine as well, a consistent double-double threat. And the reason I had him in the 20s to start is because I was weary of how the athleticism would translate and the defense as well too. And the defense still leaves a lot to be desired right now. I think that's definitely the weakest part of his game. But the athleticism, I loved what he did in FIBA play and international
Mhm.
stuff. I just thought, and he's not a ground bound big. He's capable of finishing above the rim and things like that. But he's not super explosive. More of an athlete with the runway. Although he has shown some good stuff off vertical as well too. But I just thought that he would struggle a little bit more just against the size and the length and athleticism of other bigs once they got to college. And that really just has not been the case. Like he's still physical, he's strong, the sturdy frame. He has good touch around the rim, can finish with both hands, plays hard, and that rebounding, that translates. It's just, I'm a sucker for rebounding. You got it in possessions. Like he
Same.
has the has the ability to in possessions for you, gobble up rebounds in and out of his area. And if it's not if this is one thing I know he's going to do for sure, he's going to rebound and he's going to play finish. And that's exactly what you want from your big. You will want more of the shot blocking, of course. But I think offensively, he does so many of the things that you want from a modern big man, outside of maybe the shooting, of course. But I
He's
do
experienced.
like
He's done it though. Like, he's taking
he
shots.
has.
It's not crazy volume, but he's showing a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely has. I just want for him, I just would like to see if he's going to get a little more freedom. I do want to see more than 6 attempts. Yes, 4-6 from 3 through 7 games, so that's awesome. But I do want to continue to see more of that. But I think at the end of the day, you cannot knock the production. I think it's a clear NBA role for him. How high teams may kind of really value that, we'll see. But I think he is I think it's one more move for me to make, and I think that's probably going to be as like just a bona fide lottery guy. We'll see if he moves into my top 10, but I mean, he's established himself as one of the best bigs in this class, in a class that is right now outside of Cam Boozer and however you may want to categorize Caleb Wilson is lacking like a lot of quality depth there.
A lot of good nuggets that you put in there, Jam. For me, Steinbach, you talked about the rebounding. If there's one thing that we've learned, like as a scouting community over the years, is that rebounding, regardless of position, even point guards,
Mhm.
rebounding is typically a strong translation to NBA success. It's not one for, again, going back to the discussion earlier, nothing is ever perfect in terms of translatability, right? But
Yep.
rebounding is about as good as you can get. And Steinbach is a fantastic rebounder on both ends of the floor. There's times where he's like rebounding, he's outnumbered in terms of like ability to be able to go and get a rebound, and he's still doing it. And he plays so big too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's good size, but not elite size. And I think that's where a lot of people were kind of maybe even still a little bit concerned with the translation.
Me too. Yep.
He's not a 7-footer. And you think, okay, what about Jalen Duren? He's not a 7-footer either. Jalen Duren is a phenomenal athlete, like a top tier athlete at that position. Is Steinbach a good enough athlete? That's where you can also kind of get into the concerns. Is like he's an athlete. I don't think he's a sneaky athlete. I don't think that he's a plus athlete. He's a basketball player. I think that
Yep.
that's the level of athleticism that he is. And you ask, okay, well, the offense might be good. What's the defense look like? I think the defensive concern should be a little bit less concerning. There's a lot of good footwork for him. I think that he does a lot of his work early. He's shown the ability to play out and extend his defense out to the perimeter and use his length to kind of is almost like a shepherd, right? Like a shepherd dog, like out in the field with bulls in terms of defending out on the perimeter. Like he will just use ankles. He'll kind of like usher someone along to the baseline and put them in a tough spot. And then they have to handle with the physical boundaries of the court and then also the physical imposing nature of Heinz Steinbach. Like you have to pass the ball around or over this mountain of a man. So you have to make some calculated decisions. I think he does a lot of that type of defense where it's not the traditional big man defense of like, I'm going to jump and throw your shot into the bleachers, but you're going to have to put in a lot of work if you want to get around me to score. And then that brings us to the offensive discussion where we didn't talk about the passing very much in your breakdown, Jam. Like, what do you think of his ability to have the play run through him?
I do like that. I don't think it's necessarily like hub stuff, but I do believe you can run DHOs with him. You know, he is a sound decision maker and with a functional handle. And I do think there's some good stuff and some potential at a short role as decision making and passer and stuff like that. So I do like that. I don't think it's gonna be like, hey man, we really need to run some offense through you to get some good shots. I don't think that's really what it's gonna be. But I do like the connective stuff and him being able to thrive in those sets and actions that are synonymous with the NBA.
I would say that he's not an advanced playmaker for his position,
Hmm.
but I think that he's maybe a slightly above average to above average passer, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. I think that he's clearly a plus. It's just what's the magnitude of that positive aspect of his game that he's bringing to your team. And I think with the way that the NBA is playing now, where you're playing multiple bigs, you don't even really have to worry about him not being traditional big man size. In this, you can get in the conversation about positional fit, team fit, and stuff like that. I think that he's showing that he is going to be willing to extend his game out to the perimeter, kind of like an early version of Domas Sabonis coming out of Gonzaga and playing at Oklahoma City. I think you might be able to see something like that. But I also think that you can do a lot of 5-out stuff with him too, as like a DHO option, just like you laid out, Jam. So there's so much positive aspects to Steinbach's game that I've just really grown to appreciate. I did not expect me to, of all people, to have him 10th on my board, But so far, that's just the way that, the chips have kind of fallen for me, Jam. We got two more players that we
Can I
want
ask
to
you
talk about.
one more
Oh,
quick question about Steinbach? So, as part of my concerns, you brought up the size too. That combination of just the size concerns and athleticism, particularly the vertical pop. So he's showing that the height necessarily may not matter. I am just very curious and still slightly concerned about what the measurements will be.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, on the Washington website, there's no height listed for him there. On Real GM, he's listed as 6'11". And during last summer's FIBA World Cup, they have him listed as 6'8". So over or under 6'8.5" for his measurements at the combine. What are you thinking?
Are you asking me with or without shoes?
We play basketball with shoes, so I'm going to say with shoes.
6'8.5" with shoes is I don't buy that. I think he's bigger than that. I think he might be without shoes. I think he might be that 6'8", 6'8.5", which pushes him closer to that 6'10" range, which again, still not great.
Which I'll take. I'm just concerned that it's like 6'9", 6'8". And if that's barefoot, like that's cool. Maybe we'll have to figure out, maybe that's what FIBA was doing, maybe measuring barefoot, how they do their measurements. But for him to be, there's a 3-inch discrepancy, and I don't think he grew 3 inches from that time in a few months. Maybe he did. I mean, stranger things
He's a young man, dude.
Yeah. But that does just have me a little bit concerned.
I think right now, and I might change this next year, as I've already laid out, my philosophy is ever evolving, ever changing.
You have the right to do so.
Yeah, I think that right now I'm going to play under the assumption that he's around 6'10". If he's 6'8" in shoes, I will likely change my rank. I'm not even sitting here saying that he's hands down going to be 10, because I think that we're still gathering information.
Of course,
I'm in the phase where I'm casting a wide net and I'm sifting through, and then I'm just going to kind of like polish the cannonball as the season goes on. So, if he's closer to 6'8", if you were to tell me right now he's not 10th on my board, I'll just put it that way. If you were to tell me today that he's 6'8" in shoes, he's not going to be 10th on my board.
I'm wondering what the wingspan will look like too. Like, he's long, but I'm not sure like how long. Like, if he's like 6'8", 7'1" wingspan, we can work with that.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I think that's always one of my favorite times, is to get the measurements and see how people go crazy and move people up and down the boards and things like that. But I think he, amongst others, but he's gonna be at the top of the list of the measurements and testing to watch out for when we get to the combine.
For sure, brother. All right, so we got two more guys that we're going to talk about with biggest differences. We'll hit a break, and then we're going to talk about some players that have been our favorite sleepers. This is going to be a great travel podcast, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so like as you're on the road and you're hitting your families, we're going to keep you entertained here. So, Jam, Thomas Haugh, I have him 15th on my board. Your latest board had him at 22nd, which gives us a little bit further of a gap than what we had with Hines Steinbach there.
Mm-hmm.
Haugh is a player that I struggle with coming into the season, and I still don't know. And I think that this is evident by me having him 15th on my board. I still don't know if I buy the college production translating up a level, but he is making it harder and harder to rule him out, because I think him playing an outright different position this year in college has helped his stock in a lot of ways, where he's playing the 3 for Florida as opposed to being a 4 who could give you spot minutes either at the 3 or the 5, depending on who else was out there with him on the floor last year with the Gators.
Man, you reading my notes?
No, I'm not. You don't have this on our shared doc. We literally, I'll show it, ladies and gentlemen. These are the names and the rankings on the notes. Okay, I don't know how many podcasts, by the way, are going to show you their Google Doc, but you get that here on No Ceilings with the Draft Sickos. I think that he's helped himself a lot, though, with the way that he's been playing with Florida this year. He is attacking from the perimeter, which was something that we just didn't see a whole heck of a lot of last year with the team. And That's why I feel comfortable kind of have him flirting with that lottery range. But Jam, I'm willing to bet that based off of your ranking, a lot of the same concerns that I have exist, but there's also got to be some stuff that you've been impressed with from Haugh as well, right, Jam?
Yeah, absolutely. Echo everything that you said. It's like you reading my notes, reading my mind here too. But yeah, yeah, completely agree.
Starting to get that
And
marriage brain, bro.
I know, right? I for me, why he's gone up a little bit on my board is the simple fact that he has been productive with that size and just that consistent energy and activity that he brings. At 6'9", strong frame, fluid athlete, can finish above the rim. As you already said, him playing the three, which ultimately I think he's going to be playing more of the four or the NBA level, but I think him playing the three has certainly raised his stock. As you said, is showing more of his positional versatility, both offensively and defensively. But I think more so defensively, continuing to be able to kind of show in his toolkit that he can defend multiple positions. He can be switchable and add value there anywhere in the front court. And just the consistent energy that he plays with, the play being a play finisher. He's on the glass. He does so many of those like active energy type of player stuff, the role player stuff, and his ability to continuously show that he's grown more comfortable attacking closeouts and being able to play more on the perimeter functionally. And it's just so hard to really deny that with that size, the effort. And I think for me, and maybe for you too, and I'm sure others, the shooting is the one thing I'm not necessarily concerned about it, but it is holding me back from raising him further, maybe potentially put him in that lottery discussion. Shooting 33% this year, shooting a career high 5.5 3-point attempts per game, which I certainly love the volume. That's up from 2.6 attempts last season on 34%. So I'm still
What do you
trying to
think
really,
of the I'm sorry, I wanna just get this in while you're
yeah,
already
yeah.
breaking down the shot. What do you think of the mechanics in the release from him this season?
It's I'm not that concerned about it. Maybe there's some small mechanical things kind of to smooth it out, but he does look comfortable shooting. It is repeatable. He had some
I'm
success.
encouraged by the way the confidence, like you're just saying. I'm encouraged from the confidence in his shot this season, for what that's worth, Jam. I'm kind of buying into him being a shooter at some level long term.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to figure out too, is what that long-term shot's going to look like. Is he going to be low 30s? He's going to be mid 30s? Is high 30s realistic? But I would expect somewhere on the more realistic end on for him in a positive way would be in that mid 30s. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. What is that threshold for you for him as a shooter to where like, all right, it really works. He's going to be impactful. Can he shoot low 30s, 32% and still be a impactful NBA player?
Two things that you brought up that I want to talk about to answer this question, Jam. One is that you mentioned that you buy him more as a four in the NBA, and you talked about a lot of really great things. Why I'm encouraged, you touched on the versatility, the defensive switchability, all those things. I echo a lot of those same sentiments. I just like how he's showing that he can play in an open floor as a three in the college level. I think that's going to do wonders for him playing in an even wider system in the
Yes.
NBA at the four, going up against still really good athletes in the NBA, obviously, but it's going to be a different type of player who is used to defending a specific type of way. I think that's going to give him some unique advantages, if everything kind of hits right, which means that I think a lower 3-point percentage is still okay
Mhm.
because you're not necessarily always going to be banking on your four man to be a 38% shooter from deep. I think if he is that kind of like 33 to 36 range. Again, that 3%, we were talking about 8% earlier. A 3% swing in three-point shooting at the NBA level on volume, you're talking about two different players still in even in a 3% swing. But I think in college, as long as he's doing what he's doing now, what we just touched on just a second ago, Jam, if he's showing comfortability, I almost don't even care about the percentage this year, so long as it's able to keep your head above water, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by the experimentation to be, it looks like the release is a little bit quicker this year. It looks a little bit more fluid this year, and he looks a heck of a lot more comfortable. So I'm not doubting Thomas Hauck's work ethic ever. Like, that is one thing that I'm just not gonna do. He
Yeah.
plays like a madman. If I can get him to be a somewhat consistent three-point shooter, I'm buying into that. And I think that if you look at what the NBA is telling us now, I'm gonna do, shout out again to James Barlow. I'm gonna do the complexion comparison here. But if you look at Hugo Gonzalez for Boston, early season Oklahoma City Thunder, where Brooks Barnheiser was getting legit run for this team, I think that Thomas Hauck could at least do that, and those two dudes were at least drafted at different levels, right? So, not considering all the other great things Hauck can do, I think adding a three-point shot makes him that much more valuable. I think he's done so much to improve his standing in my eyes. I know that a lot of NBA teams like him as well. He's going to have to battle, not being the youngest guy in this draft, and he's clearly a role player of sorts. So, like, how high are you willing to draft that sort of a player?
Yeah, and like that that can even branch off into, I probably have to have it another time, but a discussion about like how high do you really draft role players, or at least sacrifice drafting potential impactful role players for swinging for upside. So I think that's probably another conversation for another day. But everything is there for him to be a long-term rotation player, impactful rotation player, and potentially a starter in the right situation. We talk about the size, the strength, the NBA positional size, and potentially what is looking like a real pass, dribble, shoot skill set. So there's a lot to like about the foundation and the production that Haugh is bringing.
No doubt. All right, Jam, let's hit the last guy that you and I have a big difference on. This is our biggest difference right
Yeah.
here. And this is the biggest prospect. So it's not a big surprise to me that Aday Mara is going to be one of the guys that we're going to talk about here. We haven't really talked about him. I don't know if you and I have really shared a lot of Aday Mara thoughts together. He's been a player that we've given our opinion about through mock drafts and stuff like this. I
Hmm.
recommended that we draft him to the Atlanta Hawks, and I thought that I was going to get a little bit of pushback, but there was a lot of, no, this makes sense. Um, I have him ranked 19th, Jam. You have him 39th. I think both of these rankings from the two of us are a recognition of the improvement that he's shown at Michigan as opposed to what we were seeing at UCLA. This is going to come down to some more philosophy stuff, is how do you value a player like this? Jam, in my opinion, you touched on how we're a little bit barren on the big man, something that I wrote about in the offseason. And one
Hmm.
of my 5 offseason findings is that this class is barren on big men. So identifying the ones that you're comfortable with is going to be a tall task for a lot of NBA teams. Again, I have him 19th. You have him 39th, Jam. What do you just what have you gotten away for, or what have you taken away from the season from Aday Mara?
I think the first thing for me is really I've been impressed with the conditioning. Like
Mm,
he's playing 22 minutes a night, it's a career high for him. He's showing that for the most part that he can log starter level minutes, like what would equate to be fairly starter level minutes on the NBA level, for a center. So I'm loving that from him. He's rebounding, the play finishing, and of course, with him being 7'3" and the plus length as well too, being a rim protector and shot blocker. So him doing the big man things, and I think I buried the lead obviously with the playmaking and the passing that he's
Yep.
always been shown. And I do believe the more that he can stay out on the floor, the condition continues to improve like he's been doing, they'll have more of a chance to have the ball in his hands as more of a hub and be able to operate that way. So really just what his conditioning has allowed him to do. And maybe it's coming to conditioning him just not being, I don't, let's not say he was in the doghouse at UCLA, but maybe just not,
You could
maybe
say that.
not,
I wouldn't. I wouldn't push back on that at all.
maybe just not ready for the minutes at that time for various reasons. We'll leave it at that. But I'm excited about the conditioning that he's shown and his ability to do a lot of the big man things, despite not being the most vertically explosive. There's still some concerns about him defending in space and, getting in pick and rolls and what that will look like. But I am encouraged about what he has shown, and he's arguably my biggest riser. I haven't done the full calculations, but he was someone that was outside of my top 60, and now he's risen all the way up to 39. And I think there is still plenty of room for him to continue to grow up on my big board, rise up on my big board, and grow into the rest of his game. And I would not be surprised if I do end up having him late in the first, as you mentioned, just to kind of the lack of quality bigs right now. He has that positional size. The role is there. The conditioning is improving. So I think it's an upward trajectory for Mara right now.
Let me ask you what you think about the rebounding numbers, because I think some people might look at those at face value, or at least if they go to the game logs and they see, well, he had 7 rebounds this game, but then he had 2 rebounds this game. Are you concerned about the rebounding at all, or are you? I'll just go ahead and put my spin on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's playing alongside Axel Lindenborg, who could have been an NBA player this season if he really wanted to be. Like, he could be in the NBA right now if he was just okay with being drafted anywhere. Also, Morris Johnson Jr. coming in from Illinois, who plays with his hair on fire all night long, like one of the highest motors that you'll see in college basketball. Also being within that front court, I think you're going to look at games where it's a little bit of give and take between all 3 of these guys and the amount of rebounds that they're going to pull down.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. He's still averaging, 8.3 rebounds per game, and he has these monster rebounders alongside him. So
Yeah.
you would think if he was more reliable to be the primary rebounder, that it would be a double-digit type of rebound effort for him. But even in 22 minutes per game, the 8.3 rebounds per game, like, he is on the glass. He's doing a lot of the things that he's supposed to be doing, at that size. So I think there is plenty of reason to be encouraged. And you can say this for the end in case you want to hop on, but do you think he is a this year guy, or is this just like, I come back next year, I take another step forward, I have more usage as an offensive player and can show a bit more?
It's interesting. I would need, obviously, like, if you were to ask me today, my answer is probably going to be different in a month, but
Yeah.
I'm leaning more towards the this year stuff because of how much he is showing under Coach Dusty May at Michigan, playing alongside NBA talent. I think there's something to be said about a player who is producing next to other incredibly talented players on the floor too, right? So I weigh that a little bit into my calculus to where if he's playing along with the Axel Lindenborg and he's playing this good, how much better is he going to play with even more NBA talent? Like, how much better is that playmaking going to shine? How much better is that defense going to be able to pop? How much more is he going to be able to defend in space when defensive philosophies in the NBA are so sophisticated because of the way the game is played? Like, how much more funneling is going to happen to him to give him more opportunities to block shots, things like that, So there's a lot there. I think the conditioning is going to be something that he's going to have to just continue to work at. It's going to take I don't think he's poor. I want to lead by that. I think that he's improved year over year, but he's not a finished product in that regard. And I think that once he does get into that NBA strength and conditioning, he's going to be scary. And I know that he's not one of these floor spacing big men or anything like that, but the league is still showing us that you could be Ivica Zubac, you could be Steven Adams, you could be some of these big men that are a traditional big man and still have a lot of value. That's why I think us as a group at No Ceilings, we were so comfortable taking him in the top 20 to the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, and that Hawks fit, man, that would be a great fit for him.
Absolutely. All right, Jam. So we're going to hit our last break, and then we're going to get into our favorite risers within this group. We're going to talk about 4 prospects. We'll hit those on the other side of this break. All right, we are back here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and your podcast player of choice. Jam and I, we have set foot on an expedition to talk about our philosophies, some scouting philosophies to open the show. We went into some of the players that he and I have some of the biggest differences on, and we talked about like what some of the strengths are, some of the areas of concerns. We even gave you where we have those players ranked. We talked about Nate Ament, Hines Steinbach, Thomas Haugh, and Aday Mara in that section. Now, Jam, let's have some fun as if we already haven't been having fun. We're going to talk about some of our favorite risers to this point in about the third of the way through the season. Jam, do you want to do one for one, or do you want to go through yours first? You want me to go through mine first? How do you want to kind of go through this?
Let's hear yours. Go through yours.
Okay. All right. Surprise, surprise. This is an opportunity for me to talk about Keaton Wagler, a player who I have 26th on my board. I had him unranked, Jam. I opened up the show saying that not hardly anybody knew who this kid was. I mean, he was 3 prospect. We talk about this at No Ceilings all the time because Tyler Metcalf is Minnesota's his backyard. Keaton Wagler had an offer to Illinois and in Minnesota. Obviously chose Illinois. Averaging 15 points, about 5 boards, over 3 assists, 1 stock per game, only 2.2 personal fouls per game, and less than 1.5 turnovers per game. Starting every game for this team, shooting splits of 44, 49, and 84. Jam, I've mentioned this in a few different places. It's funny because now there's almost like this like-off happening within the draft community on how much people are wanting to say that they love Keaton Wagler and they're putting him in the top 10s and lottery conversations. I love him, and I have him 26th on my board because I still think that there are areas that he needs to get better at. Those areas to me are on the defensive glass. As a defensive playmaker, he obviously has to fill out that skinny frame a little bit better. He's got to be more sound across all levels of the defensive end. But Jam, I mean, you're talking about a dude who's shooting 39% from deep on 9 attempts per 100 possessions while simultaneously giving you a free throw rate of 57, true shooting percentage of 61. He's got a BPM of 7.9. That's tied for 14th among all freshmen, ranking above Koa Pete, Malik Thomas, Nate Ament, and Neoklis Abdullah. So, Jam, there's a diversified game within Keaton Wagler. You and I have talked about him a lot. He is the first guy that it was almost a given. Anybody who's listened to me knew that this was coming, that Keaton Wagler was going to be my favorite riser.
Yeah, and he's been absolutely incredible. And I would imagine that he's a riser on nearly everybody's board. These people I haven't talked to, I haven't talked to anyone who came out preseason that's had him, top 20 or anything like that. So this is one of the beautiful things about scouting is these players that kind of come out of nowhere, even if they do kind of have a pedigree, but this with just the girth and depth of prospects that are available, and then we have to watch and just be considered and end up getting ranked. So he is been such an awesome surprise, and really his skill set fits exactly what the NBA is looking for. Just the pass, dribble, shoot, wing skill set. I do wish that he maybe was a little bit taller. I think what's listed at 6'6".
6'6", yeah.
6'6". So I wish he'd maybe had more of a big type of wing, especially when you're more of a wiry type of guy and wouldn't have to worry about the strength concerns. But for me, I do believe that like those type of things with strength, once you get an NBA strength conditioning program, you kind of grow into your grown man body, get that grown man strength. Those natural muscle and strength gains happen. So I'm not as concerned about that. Just being taller or a more explosive athlete kind of compensates for that quicker and just makes the transition and the projection a little easier. At least for me, it does. But pass, dribble, shoot, wing, defensive playmaker, can run pick and roll, attack second sides, closeouts, do these type of things. Like outside of just the strength and him maturing that way, the skill set is almost plug and play. Like like it's everything that you really want. He's going to give you effort. Like I really do like what Wagler continues to bring. I believe you said you had him at 26.
Yep, 26 on my board.
26,
Yeah.
and I have him at 27. And I believe
Let's go.
I believe he's someone that's going to continue to rise as the season goes on. And Illinois is going to be in big game after big game, and he's going to have these prime time matchups. And I think he's going to continuously deliver. And I would not be surprised for him to end up in that lottery at the end of the day. I think for me, he's probably going to end up in that top 20 range. We'll see how this season goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up for the lottery with me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I got some guys above him right now who I could easily see sliding beneath Wagler. One of those was I mentioned how Wagler has a better BPM than Neoklas Abdalas. Abdalas came out of the gates really, really hot, had that big Providence game. A lot of people were saying top 10, top 10. Since then, he's still had some decent performances here or there. Vatek, Wahoo Wah, right? Did I do that right?
Close. Don't do that to me. That's our rival, though.
Oh, okay.
UVA were the Wahoos and
my bad.
Yeah, no, it's all good. We'll let that one slide.
I'm still trying to learn. I'm trying to get there.
Who's Nation? Don't jump on Steven. He's learning. We'll forgive him.
I'm learning. I'm trying. I'm trying my best. But Jam, I could see him going above some of the guys that I have right now. I think we are both acknowledging the crazy growth and notoriety, but also the production that he's showing this year. And just to add some more context, Jam, you're talking about how plug and play he is. He's great on and off the ball. If you look, he's in the 95th percentile as a scorer right now in pick and roll handling. He's in the 74th percentile in isolation. He's in the 76th percentile on dribble jumpers, shooting over 44% on his dribble jumper threes. He's in the 63rd percentile at the rim. And Jam, he's a very good playmaker too. He's had a double-digit assist game already this season. If you look, Synergy, our friends over at Synergy have him ranked in the 84th percentile in all scoring possessions. If you include assists, he leaps up to the 90th percentile. So a guy with a 2.3 assist turnover ratio not only is a sound scorer, has had some fun rebounding flashes throughout the season as well, but he's also a very sound decision maker, Jam.
He is. It's a lot of NBA qualities and skills that teams certainly do covet, which is why he has been a riser and will continue to be a riser for sure. What if that's what I'm trying to think right now. If I do have him, like I said, at 27, in a way, I feel like I should have him higher because I really just like the skill set. I think what's really holding me back is, at least right now, is just seeing how he is going to continuously compensate for the lack of strength on both ends of the court. And I think if I see that, I will move him up. Or if he just continues to be incredibly productive, if he is going to be this wing that can space the floor, can run pick and rolls consistently, it's just like, man, like even with some strength concerns and vertical pop concerns, it's like, hey, like the foundation, the skill set, the tools, it just screams lottery.
It does, man, and I'm not going to put a ceiling on how high he
Mhm.
can,
We don't do that
rise.
here at No
Yeah,
Ceilings.
we don't believe in ceilings, never had to. Um, I think that Wagler is shown a lot just from November to December,
Yeah.
going from unknown to undeniable already, and I think that as the season progresses, we get even more data. In my opinion, that's even more reason to slide him up our boards right now. I think right now we're looking at a first round talent this year. It's just at some point we're trying to figure out exactly how that measures up. But we still got a good amount of season left, Jam, to figure that out. I want to transition now to my other favorite riser. And we were talking about some big men earlier. I have another big man. I'm starting to love the big men um in the class that I didn't think that I was gonna like. It's just these influx of different big men that are making the discussion a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Eric Reibe. I've heard so many different variations of his name. I'm going with Reba because I think that's what I've heard the most on commentary. Eric Reba, I have him 28th on my board. He was outside my top 60 coming in. His numbers at face value, I feel like we say this about every UConn big man that's ever gone through their program, in their freshman season. The numbers at face value aren't going to like blow you away. Almost 9 points per game, 4.5 rebounds per game, about a half assist, half a steal, 1.5 blocks per game, 2.2 fouls per game, less than one turnover per game. Jam, 65% from the floor overall, very low volume, but 40% from deep, and a
Mhm.
56% free throw percentage. Jam, I think that one, there's not said this a lot. There's not a lot of great big men just kind of like running away with this class. I feel like Eric Reibe is always involved in all the right ways as a big man for UConn. They obviously stagger him with Terrace Reed Jr. But when Reibe is on the floor, I never have to question his effort. I feel like he's always doing something to contribute to the game, whether that's rejecting shots, coming down with boards, setting hard screens, stringing a play along. He's ranks at the 91st percentile scoring at the rim, and he's in the 86th percentile in at rim frequency. He moves, he sets screens. He's just doing all the big man things well at such a young age. And he's big, dude. Like, I just think that it's almost an easy evaluation for him, but it's simple. And sometimes simple gets knocked in the draft community. And I don't know why, but it's a simpler evaluation, but it doesn't mean that it's not valuable and it's not effective and productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to know that you're that high on him. And I think he's someone that's going to keep climbing on my board too. I currently have him outside of the top 60. And I really enjoyed hearing your evaluation of him. It's particularly you talked about the effort and him doing a lot of the big man things because a part of the knocks on him and kind of concerns of what people, including myself, wanted to see more of is him do the big man things, be more physical. And I think he is doing that. And I think under Dan Hurley, he's going to
Yeah.
demand that, and I applaud him for choosing to go to UConn, for those type of reasons. And I think we are really starting to see that early with him, and we'll continue to see that all year long for him doing the big man things as you mentioned, making sure that he is getting contact on screens, rolling hard. He is coming over to protect the rim, on the weak side and things like that. The main sell on offense is him being a pass, dribble, shoot big, at least functional,
Mm.
in those aspects. Something he's done in high school. I got a chance to see him up close a lot while he was here at the Bullis School. Actually, seen him play Nate Ament a couple times in person as well too. Where he was actually defended by Nate, and believe it or not, Nate held his own against him in the post a couple of times. And that kind of speaks to, I guess, both sides of the coin, my belief in Nate and kind of his toughness and being willing to get in there, be defensive playmaker, and be competitive. And then also some of the concerns going into the year with Aday Mara, with him being able, or his lack of physicality consistently. So I just wanted to really see him be able to space the floor. I think that will happen. It probably won't be happening too much this year. Maybe get some more freedom next year when he is going, when he should have more offensive usage, which is my guess. But right now, he's only taken 10 threes, which isn't terrible through the 10 games, but he is shooting 40%. But it's 0.8 threes per game. I'd like to see that maybe get to 2 next year. But him to show that he can be a consistent floor spacer, be a reliable play finisher despite not being super vertically explosive, but to show that touch around the rim and be able to finish with both hands too. So there's a lot to like about him, but I really do want to see that offensive game eventually take that next step outside of just being a play finisher. And I do think that will happen, when his time is ready. I almost gave a John Cena quote about
When
his
his
time
time
being
is
now.
now.
Yeah.
The good news is that we can see Eric Reibe now.
Yes.
There is a positive Jam. It's early. It's a UConn big man, and they run a platoon. So I get the almost, the expectation that he's going to be back.
Yeah.
I could see NBA teams wanting to draft him in that mid to late first round range, but history tells us that these UConn big men, they're smart to go to UConn first off. Like they're smart kids, they're just like in general. But do you could you see him coming out this year, Jam? Or like, is it because he's like kind of doing this like by committee thing that you're not certain of him being a this year guy?
Yeah, it's that and the combination of I'm just not sure what skill is NBA ready right now. So I think if he came out, that runs the risk of like, hey, I'm bouncing around the G League with the team. I'm kind of going up and down. And everyone has their opinions on development or maybe lack thereof development structure in the G League. But I just think him staying in school next year, maybe the year after that, is going to be a much better route, not only just financially, but
Yeah.
for his development long term, to be able to get that usage. You still playing on the huge stage at UConn, a chance to win, one of the best coaches in the game, period. So I would have a hard time believing that he will leave. I think it would have to take something very significant, like he's going on like this real double-double stretch or close to double-double stretch in conference play or late in the season, or he, is really just turning more heads during conference play and the NCAA tournament. Obviously, you don't want to read too much into big NCAA tournament performances, but I think something like that could parlay him to being like, hey, well, I got this momentum. Let me go ahead and at least test the waters, go ahead in the combine and maybe impress people there. But all in all, I think he's back next year.
Just to put some context to some numbers to the player here. 69% on his twos, Jam. He's got a defensive rebounding percentage of 20, an offensive rebound of 8.4, block percentage of 9.3. I think that's the NBA skill if he comes out. He's a heck of a rim deterrent already. BPM of 8.5. That's 10th among freshmen. So that's above what we were talking about just a moment ago with Keaton Wagler and all the other freshmen that he is already doing better at. He's in the 96th percentile in all scoring possessions. He is in the 82nd percentile as the roll man in going by committee. 18 blocks on the season. He is at 21 stocks to 26 fouls. There's still a lot of game to be learned from him, so I get it. And if I had to put money on it, I would be willing to bet that he returns. I'm leaving that door open from what I've seen from November to December. He's just been one of my favorite guys to just kind of be taken by surprise this year, Jam. So those were my two favorite sleepers, Jam. We got a couple that you brought to the table. I'm just going to turn it over to you, man. Pick which one you want to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about Kingston Fleming. We mentioned him a little bit earlier, not to start things off, but for me, he was someone that came into the season unranked. Not that I didn't believe in the talent or anything like that, or didn't get a chance to really watch him. It was just more so, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I didn't know how much usage and trust there would be, at least initially, from Coach Sampson, and how that usage would go when you have someone like Uzan coming back, who arguably could have left last year, but was definitely ticketed to have a bigger role this year and kind of really be his team and everything to revolve around him. But Kingston has absolutely flipped that on his head. He really looks like to be the engine of that team. The burst off the bounce, that first step, is absolutely electric. His ability to create paint touches with and without a screen, to be able to spray the ball out of pick and rolls, the drop off passes, and both hands. Like, it's a lot of really good stuff that he's shown. I had to kind of pump the brakes just a little bit, because although he's unranked, he took a nice little rise for me to get to number 11.
Yeah.
Um, and I do believe he's someone that's going to probably crack my top 10 once we get there. But he certainly deserves to be in that conversation for the first point guard taken with Michael Brown and LeBaron Philon. To me, Michael, I think, is a tier above them, of both of
Okay.
those guys. But I do think on the pace that Kingston is playing on, you want to see the 3-point numbers continue to hold. It's going to take, obviously, some type of regression. He's not going to shoot 51.7% the whole season, but you just hope that it doesn't take anything that's like drastic to where he is shooting in the low 30s or anything like that. But just want to continue to see him grow as a shooter and as a shot maker. But it's really difficult to say anything bad about what his game has been.
Right.
He's a defensive playmaker. Obviously, you want him to get stronger and the lean frame, but there's so much to like about him, and kind of those physical tools and the strength, as I mentioned before. Those things just find a way to work themselves out as long as you are in the weight room doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, Kingston Flemings has been a revelation as a prospect, dude. I had very, very low, if any, expectations of him at all. All of those would have been exceeded exponentially. You talked about the coach belief. You talk about the peer belief. Those are things that I think should not go understated. You're talking about a player who's averaging about 15 points per game, 3 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, 1.5 fouls per game, only 2.1 turnovers per game. Shooting splits of 61, 52, and 76 is absolutely insane, Jam. I mean, he's shooting moderate 3-point volume, just over 5.5 attempts per 100 possessions, but has an assist percentage of 33, true shooting percentage of 69.2, a BPM of 14.2, Jam. That is second among all freshmen. Guess who he's behind?
Got to be Cam.
Got to be Cam. It's Cam Boozer, right? So only Cam Boozer has done better in a stat that's supposed to be one of the more, I'm not saying it's the best or anything like that, but BPM for college, for you Bart Torvik heads out there, not a bad indicator for an all-in-one stat.
Yeah.
And Kingston Fleming trails only Cam Boozer in that regard. Jam, I've spoken about him at several times, where I think that he is a very decisive player, and I think that's almost his superpower, because whether he's on the ball or getting it off of the catch, he knows exactly what he wants to do with the rock. He isn't the most bendy or flexible or even most explosive player, but he thinks the game fast, and he's not slow. Like, he's got a very good first step, very quick first step, but there's just not a lot of bend, lean, wiggle, flex, like whatever descriptor you want to apply to a ball handler or primary ball handler. That's where he trails a Michael Brown Jr., in my opinion, where Michael's athleticism, flexible nature, the lean, the bend, all that stuff. I think that he best Flemings, but Flemings does a lot of the winning things that might kind of outweigh the athletic wow factor that you can get from a guy like Michael. I'm glad that you brought him up. Is there any way that you can see Kingston being point guard 1 in this class?
I'm always gonna say you want to be on because things can change. Don't want to be closed off, but like it's gonna be tough. I'm just such a
What would it
Michael.
take? Or do you even know?
It's gonna take Michael Brown Jr. to really fall, even though he's shooting sub 30% from three. That's not something that concerns me. Like the shot making, the versatility has been there, and I've said that I equate a lot of what I'm seeing from his shooting projection to Tyrese Maxey, who's been the near 40% three-point shooter on the NBA level after shooting under 30% in his 1 year at Kentucky. So I just really love Michael Brown. It's going to be tough, and his could continue ascent. The growth spurt, the newfound athleticism. Like he is still growing and developing physically outside of what's already been such an advanced skill set that he has shown. Since high school and already this year. I think it's just going to be tough to catch that young man.
And it's gonna be an interesting discussion. We're gonna have months to
Mhm.
kind of look at those 2 next to each other and figure out what you value more. But the discussion that I'm having with Kingston Flemings, like, as a player, it reminds me of how I talked about Cason Wallace coming out of Kentucky, if that makes sense, Jam, where it was like, I don't know if I trust him as like a lead guard. I don't know about all these different things, but that's where fit and context kind of come into play. And you can go to the right place and then you don't have to worry about all those things. You can just kind of do what you do best. And he might be, do you think that is a possibility that he could be, to use your phrase that you used earlier, is it possible that he could be more fit proof as opposed to a Michael Brown, where it almost feels like Michael has to have the ball like at a healthy level to get the highest end outcome out of him?
I actually think they both have to have the ball in their hands, but I would trust Michael a little bit more because I think just the shooting. I ultimately trust
Okay.
Michael, although the numbers don't indicate it right now. I
The
trust
52%
Michael.
is not bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I trust Michael as a shooter just a little bit more, based off of priors and things like that. But both of them, their bread is going to be buttered by being that lead guard, that primary. Obviously, can play, alongside of someone else too, but they're going to have to be lead guards to get the most out of them because otherwise, I think I would be looking for, as you mentioned, Cason Wallace. Like I would be looking for one of them if you're not going to be on the ball to be just like this dogged defender to really have a lot of tools
Good
defensively
point.
to do stuff off the ball. But I don't think either one of them have those chops, despite being fairly solid defensive playmakers. With Fleming being, I think, a better defensive playmaker than Michael at this stage.
And they both have good size too for their
Yep.
position, which you'd
Yep.
love to see. All right, Jam. Last player, probably the most fun player that we're going to be talking about here on the show, is the last guy that you have as your favorite riser. Go ahead and shock the world with who you're going to be bringing up here.
Yeah, Chad Baker-Mazara. I mean, honestly, he's one of those. I think we all have these type of prospects when it's like, just when you think you're out, they pull you
They
right back
bring
in,
you back in. Yeah.
nice and tight. Bring it in. Like that's exactly where I'm at. With Chad. I mean, really, the reasons why I was out on him has nothing to do with his age and being 25. Maybe just a very small, but that's not that doesn't really bother me about that. As long as you can be an impactful player, I'm not worried about the age. But for me, it was the on-court maturity that
Mm.
I was having a tough time and still am having a tough time wrestling with.
About to
I
say
love
it's not all that much better, Jam, in terms of on-court maturity.
Yeah, the temperament, it can be volatile, like, it goes up and down, but I think at the baseline, I do love the competitive nature. It does have to be
Yeah.
toned down. He can't be baited into texts and, into some things. But so I want to see that toned down, him kind of get his emotions under control a little bit more. But you're looking at a 6'6" long and rangy 3 and D wing. he continuously is proving that he can shoot the ball and have some shot making versatility off the bounce, some stuff off of movement. This year, he's shooting 36.7% from three on a career high 6.6 3-point attempts per game. And on his career, who would have thought? He's a 39.2 3-point shooter, just right under 40% on 3.5 attempts per game. So he's really established himself despite being in college all this time. He is
his sixth season in college,
yeah.
I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's showing that he is a reliable shooter and shot maker that teams can rely upon to space the floor. And I give him a ton of credit. He's at 21.5 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists per game, and 2.3 stocks per game. And he stepped up majorly. And when they would need him to do the rest of the season, with Rodney Rice being out at USC, Rodney was having a terrific year, adjusting to playing point guard and being in a new place.
You wrote about him earlier in the
yes,
season, too.
Quick little plug I wrote about Rodney Rice, who unfortunately it came out, I think it was yesterday, that he would be out for the rest of the season with that shoulder injury, which is really unfortunate. As I mentioned, it was a fantastic season. I think he really could have drawn a lot more attention if he was able to stay healthy. But really, Chad's team, and we'll see what happens with Elijah Arenas, which will be a lot of fun. But, he's a 3-and-D guy who's shown that he can be a scorer. There's a competitive nature, this competitive edge and nastiness to work with there that you have to reel in a little bit. But there's a lot to like, and I'm not quite sure if teams will put draft value on him. Maybe they will. But I think if you're looking somewhere in that mid to late second round or as an undrafted free agent, if he's kind of dictating where he wants to go, like he has the ability to really return such high-end value from where he's going to be potentially selected. And those type of guys, I call them margin monsters. He has that ability to be a margin monster for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about the shooting. Block percentage of 4.9, Jam. He's got 19 blocks on the season. That might be my favorite thing that he's done this season is the weak side rim protection with his length, his athleticism. I don't know how many times I can say that like a wing has had 19 blocks at this point while also ranking in the 100th percentile in isolation scoring as well, Jam. And he's running pick and rolls, 73rd percentile as pick and roll ball handler, hitting his open 3-point shots where he ranks in the 86th percentile in synergy on his threes when left open, hitting 37.2% of his threes off of the bounce. Not getting to the rim very much at all, and just kind of so when he gets there. You kind of almost feel like you know what you're getting with Chad Baker-Mazara, and there's a level of comfort in that, but then there's also the how much do I invest in getting this guy? And I think you brought up a fantastic point where, okay, sure, I'll get him in the second round, or maybe the political nature of the draft kicks in and he and his agent say, nope, we want to pick where we want to go. We feel like we can go be a wing player on a team that doesn't really have any wings and have a really good shot at working our way into the conversation. So 6th and 1s on the season, second on this team overall. There's just there's a lot of just weird stuff, and Jam, he's one of these classic, you write him off and he kind of makes you have to keep tabs on him as the season continues. It's been a hectic season for him, man. And I got to go back and watch some more of him. I've seen, I think, 2 games of him this year. I feel like I got to watch more because the production has just been undeniable.
Yeah, absolutely. He could be, be Cody Rhodes here from undeniable.
Yeah.
Where's he from? You come undeniable to undesirable to undeniable. There we go.
That's it.
So I just excited with what he could potentially be. I think just, could have to, you probably need a fairly strong veteran presence, kind of bringing him in, just to have someone to guide him. He's as you really want for any rookie, but I think really in his case, it would really behoove a team to do that.
Yeah, selfishly, I would have a lot of fun watching him at Portsmouth with you, Jam. I think that would be really fun to see. He's probably gonna
Fingers
at worst
crossed.
gonna be a G League guy, but
Completely agree. Yeah.
we'll see. But all right, Jam. That's gonna wrap up the show here that we have for everybody. Our holiday special is what I'm gonna sell this as now. Because this is gonna be the perfect podcast for you to listen to on your travels. Jam, we're gonna get off here, but before we do, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you, brother. And do you have anything working on behind the scenes that you want to kind of share with the audience here?
Yeah, absolutely. Just in the same spirit of the holiday season, should have by the time everybody's listened to it will be out. It's a prospect thanks and wish list where I kind of talk about 6 prospects that I want to give thanks to what they've been doing so far this year. Then also just one little aspect or factor about their game, that I'm hoping or wishing for the next year. So I'm excited to get that out and get some feedback on that.
Right on. I can't wait to read that, man. And as for myself, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna be hitting the road here on probably the day that this is gonna be posted on YouTube. It might be the day after everyone's listening on your podcast feed. I'll be on the road. I'll be in Arkansas. I'll probably not gonna get back home until maybe I'll be back at work again for No Ceilings, like around the week of the 5th in January. And because I've been successfully married for coming up on 15 years, I asked the wife, do you mind if I bring podcast equipment or, stuff to work on articles? And she smiled at me and said, no. So I'm going to bank some goodwill now. That way, when April and May and June come through, I have some love bank put in, some deposits in on her love bank that I can cash in on later. So it's going to be a little bit for you here from me, but I hope you all have a good holiday period, a happy New Year as well. And I'm going to be coming back swinging whenever I come back.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to that. And I appreciate everyone sticking with us so we can get over 2 hours here on this holiday edition one. So really appreciate y'all and can't really wait to get back in the new year with we're gonna gear up for almost like it's January. We're gonna be talking about NCAA
baby.
tournament soon and like gearing up for the home stretch.
Absolutely. All right. So that's going to do it for us here on the Draft Sicko Show, here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show, on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel, and your podcast player of choice. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. Go to NoCeilingsNBA.com and follow everything that we're doing there. Listen to the No Ceilings podcast. Listen to the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings. There is already another episode of the Ground Floor podcast, a collaboration with No Ceilings. That's with the folks over at the Field of 68. Go and listen to that episode as well. And that is where you can find all the stuff that we're doing. But for my co-hosts, Jam Boozer, Hines, for myself and the rest of the No Ceilings team, we love you guys. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year's. And we will catch up with y'all next time. Much love, y'all.